It's my privilege to welcome Diane Bergant as our guest today. Diane, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, where are you today?
I'm in Chicago
Chicago.
at Catholic Theological Union.
Where are you from originally?
Originally, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from Milwaukee.
Oh, Milwaukee. Cool. Yeah. And you have, I looked at your resume. You have honorary doctorates from all over the place, and president of the Catholic Biblical Association, which I was a member of for many years. You've spoken all over the world. You were one of the first women scholars among Roman Catholics of the Old Testament. And that's amazing. You're part of the Congregation of St. Agnes.
Correct.
Tell us Protestants, like what is that?
Well, I'm a nun. All right. That's what that means. I belong to a religious community of women that's located in Wisconsin, and we're about 170 years old. Which means that we were one among many communities that were founded during the immigrant movement within the United States. And we were founded to minister to the German-speaking Catholics in the Wisconsin area. That was our initial foundation, which of course then grew and grew and grew. I always say I don't have a drop of German blood in me. And so it's not, we're not Germans, but that was our foundation. Like many communities of our kind, we were founded to teach, and then gradually we also did hospital work. So those were our primary ministries. But then again, it opens up depending upon the need. I don't think we have anyone still in the classroom except myself. And I'm adjunct faculty. I'm part-time. I don't teach full-time anymore.
We share a lifelong relationship with my mentor, Father Roland Murphy. He's also a Roman Catholic, a great teacher. And you knew Roland. You studied with Roland?
I did. Right. I took summer classes with Roland when I was a graduate student. I did not study with him. I forgot where he was in. Where was he? I forgot exactly. Where did you study with him?
Well, I was at Duke. You might have caught him up in Washington, though.
I got him at St. Louis University for summer school. But I knew him more as a colleague.
Yeah.
And we would be at biblical meetings together. And long time ago, we were part of a commission. There were three of us, biblical scholars, myself, Roland, and Eugene Leverdier. And we were part of a committee working with the bishops. So I knew him in that capacity.
Roland was part of the Congregation of St. Agnes. Roland was a Carmelite.
Carmelite, exactly. He was the Cal.
Amazing panache. So his birthday came in 2002 on July 17th, and he was near death, and he did not die on his birthday. He hung on till the next day, which was the feast day of Elijah.
That's right.
If you're a Roman Catholic, Old Testament scholar, Carmelite, that's like, what a day to go. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
He was amazing. He was such a great teacher.
He was. Well, he was a good scholar, but he was a nice man as well. Roland never spoke down to people. He never made you feel you didn't know much, which can happen sometimes. He was what I consider part of the vanguard of scholars, and this was across the board in theology, but we're talking about the biblical scholars, the vanguard who really broke open the teaching of the Second Vatican Council.
What's your interest in the Psalms? How did you get interested in the Psalms yourself?
Well, as a member of a religious community, we pray them daily. And so
say more about that. You recite one a day. What do you do? Tell me.
No. There's a liturgical format for the Liturgy of the Hours, and it's a structured kind of a prayer And within that, uh, now we pray it twice a day, but it's a monastic custom. And in the monastic tradition, they say it 7 times a day. And that's why they call it Liturgy of the Hours. And there's a set format. And within that, there are 3 Psalms that you say in the morning and 3 Psalms that you say in the evening at Vespers. Well, we call it evening prayer now. And that's how I got to know the Psalms, by praying them. Are we disconnected?
No. And so my story with Roland, so this is amazing.
Okay, yeah.
Is Roland, I was his teaching assistant when I was working on a PhD with him, and he called me in his office one day and he said, "Next semester I'm teaching the Psalms. I want you to be my assistant." I needed the money, so I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." And I said, "How do I prepare?" Now, normally when I would ask him that question, he would go through his shelves and pull down like 10 thick German books,
Right,
slam them down and say, "Master these," like by next week. And he did that a couple of days later. But that day he said to me, "What I want you to do, the way to prepare is to pray the Psalms. Pray one in the morning, pray one in the evening."
yeah.
I said, "Oh, I can do that." I left his office and went to visit a friend at Duke Hospital who was in the process of dying of cystic fibrosis. And she asked me when I was leaving the hospital, she said, I know you come this way to and from your apartment when you go into the divinity school. She said, "Could you stop in the morning and stop in the evening and just pray a psalm with me?" And I said, "Were you talking to Father Murphy?" And she said, "No." So I really got involved with the Psalms more than I had been.
Yeah.
Hospital room. But so you prayed the Psalms all your life, but then you're a scholar of the Psalms. What's the relationship between those? Does scholarship make it easier to pray, different to pray? Do you have a deeper understanding? How would you talk about that?
Well, I'm very fortunate. I have not found it difficult to pray after I study. There are some people, when you really go in depth and study, the Psalms, some people then find it difficult to pray because their mind begins to analyze it. That has not been my practice. There's another problem that somehow or other I've been able to work through, and that is that there are people who pray the Psalms regularly, frequently find it difficult because they do not always share the sentiments that they're praying. For example, when you really feel you want to pray a lament, you're praising. And so, to get into the sentiments of the psalm for people are very difficult. And whenever I teach, and I realize now I'm sort of sidestepping your question, whenever I teach the Psalms, which I do frequently to groups of religious women, I bring this issue up, and you can see the head shaking. And I say, but you have to remember, when we pray the Psalms in common, we are not individuals here praying. We represent the church. We are the church praying the prayer of the church. And being the church praying, you can be sure if you don't feel those sentiments, there is someone who does. And that person may be sitting right next to you that you don't know it. So there's something about praying the Psalms regularly, and praying them in common, not simply praying them yourself, but when you pray them in common, you are not an individual praying. And in a certain sense, it sounds very harsh. If you don't feel that, too bad. You're lucky you don't, or too bad you don't. Someone does. And so you talk about being in solidarity. You are then in solidarity with those who cry out the lament, or you are in solidarity with those who are begging for forgiveness. So I personally have never had the difficulty of working through something and then having my mind continue to work through it when I'm praying it. In fact, it's been just the opposite. Frequently, and this happened when I've got a 3-volume Preaching the New Lectionary. It's a 3-volume set that's 20 years old, and it's still quite popular because what I do, I take the 3 readings of the Sunday Gospel or the Sunday Liturgy, and I give, I analyze these 3 readings, and then I give some suggestions for preaching. It's intended to be an aid for those who have to preach every Sunday. Now, when I was going through that, it happened a couple times, and it was a strange experience. But when I was analyzing or really in depth, opening up the meaning of the passage, sometimes I was so moved by the depth of that theology, I was almost brought to tears. So I just feel I'm very fortunate. I don't struggle with it in the way that some people might. And I don't know why. It does not make me any better. I just don't struggle with it.
I know Father Murphy he said a great many things in teaching the Psalms. He loved that phrase that the Psalms are a school of prayer, that they teach it. It occurs to me talking to you that he was right there over my shoulder.
Yes.
I didn't even notice that till just then. Yeah. He keeps an eye on me here in my office to be sure I do good work. But the Psalms are a school of prayer, that we don't just know how to pray. God welcomes all prayer, but the Psalms school us in how to pray, and we have that solidarity with other people. I know for me, what Roland first taught me about the historical critical approach to Psalms, it really did help me to think some Psalms are Psalms of praise and some are thanksgivings. That's different, isn't it? You thank God for something God did for you versus praising God for how amazing God is. And then there's so many laments, but then maybe those laments came in a situation where you went to the temple and the priest pronounced a blessing over you after you cried out to God for help. Some of the Psalms are communal in their very nature. They're not for solo prayer. It's a community praying together.
Right. Yeah. The largest category is lament, which tells you something about ancient Israel. I mean, if the primary prayer is one of lament, they got a hard time.
Isaac Bashev, a singer, who said, "I only pray when I'm in trouble." The thing is, I'm in trouble all the time.
There was an excitement. We got excited about our theology because we got new insights. We got new insights and across the board. And we were excited, and we rediscovered the positive elements of prayer. We were not always, down with the negative elements. And so you get the sense, again, I don't know, I'm not a church historian, but perhaps the issue is that having gone through, a kind of Jansenism where, everything is sinner, 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 which we are, but we were dragged down by that there is a reaction to it, and there may be not a denial, but a lessening of an acknowledgement of our sinfulness. There's something in certain Roman Catholic spiritualities that we never have to worry. There'll always be somebody who stands up and reminds us we're sinners. Always a spirituality that will do it.
I was too young when the Second Vatican Council met. So for those who don't know, that was in the early 1960s. Pope John the 23rd called a big council. It was really an epical moment. Like, let's throw open the doors and the windows and learn all we can. I think we have we kind of see this now. People in my neighborhood have signs that say, among other things, science is real. Right. Yeah. So we have people now in our world that they're afraid of knowledge. And in the life of faith, what the Second Vatican Council said is what we Protestants supposedly have always believed, is that knowledge is good. We welcome any and all learning wherever it can come from, and that will help us toward God. It won't lead us away from God.
But new cosmology is very threatening to our theological understanding of our faith. Very threatening, some would say. Others would say it's challenging. Now, I'm excited about new cosmology, but let's just say something so simple. If there is intelligent life someplace else in the universe, how do you understand universal salvation through Jesus? I mean, that's a challenge, you know. And how do you understand, you know, the validity of the of the church? Roman Catholicism has difficulty with ecumenism. What are we going to do if you go beyond earthlings? You know, so when they say science is real, you know, they are probably doing that for those who say science is, what's the word? I thank God I forgot the word. Fake news.
There you are. There you
There
are.
are people who say, you know, climate change is fake news. New cosmology is fake news. I don't know how they can say that, but there are some, you know.
So let me ask you a couple more psalm questions. Then I want to take a minute and go with you to the Song of Songs and something in wisdom. But on psalms,
Yes.
So here's something. Thomas Merton. I need to look it up. Somewhere Thomas Merton said he asked the question, "Do you have a favorite psalm?" And he said, "You may have a different favorite psalm at a different point life, because that's one of the ways that God speaks to you and nurtures you." Do you have a favorite psalm?
No. Easy answer. No, I don't have a favorite psalm. You know, I think the Psalms speak to us. Well, how shall I say it? It's almost as if the dynamic is in the Psalm. I would say that there are times when a longing or a need within us recognize something in the Psalms, and different things at different times. There is a reading. Once again, I go back to the liturgy of the hours. It's not in Lenten readings. There's different readings for Lent, but there is a reading, and it's not a psalm reading. It's a passage from Ezekiel, believe it or not. And there's a little phrase that is found in other places of the scripture. I recognized it right away, but it was a Sunday morning, and I was reading this reading from Ezekiel, and the last verse of the reading was, "You shall be my people, and I will be your God." That passage, I know what that passage is. I know what that means. I know it's covenant language, but it grabbed me in such a way that, once again, I was so moved by that passage. And I mean, in no way did the passage change. It was something that was going on within me that was now open to the passage, and I saw what had always been there. It's almost like I'm not saying this was a mystic moment, but who's to say what a mystic moment is? But the mystics say, you know, that the reality of God and the other world is with us always, but it's like a veil, and every once in a while the veil lifts and we get an insight. It was that kind, you know, of an experience, and I think many people have that. All of a sudden, they don't know why, but something, you know, from the Psalms or something from the scripture grabs them in a way they'll never forget it. And that, I was asked, I gave an interview for a magazine, Catholic magazine, not too long ago. And they asked me, "What's your favorite passage?" Immediately, I gave them that passage from Ezekiel. And I should have said, at this point in my life, this is my favorite passage. But there have been other points when other things were my favorite passage.
And as you go through the Psalms over and over, a new one will speak. I know the week after, my story on that is it's not a personal thing so much as a world thing. So the week after 9/11,
Oh, yes.
I was working through the Psalms, and I came to one I had never paid attention to before, and that is Psalm 102, which has all this evocative language about, "I stand among the ruins, my days pass away like smoke. I'm like an owl upon the ruin." I'd never paid attention to that psalm before, and it totally explained. I forget to eat my food. I lie awake at night. All of that in that psalm, it was annihilatingly powerful.
Because of what was happening, exactly. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see. You know, they just, an aside, they just discovered some fragments in Qumran, that sea scrolls. It'll be
in Getty, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if anything, you know, changes with little, you know, manuscripts. I don't think they're big enough pieces for it to change. But it's interesting. Give them something that is a lament, that they can pray when they feel bad, when things in life are not hurting. And there's always, look at the world today. We ought to be praying laments because of what's going on in our country. We ought to be, 500,000 people died from a virus that was going to go away if we use bleach. Give them a lament. Give them a psalm of thanksgiving. Give them a psalm of praise, and then invite them. How does this resonate with your experience, with your religious sentiments? That's a way of doing it. And just start them off. I'm just talking off the top of my head. Start them off with 5 simple psalms. That's a good way for them, And the Bible has footnotes. And the footnote in the Bible tells them what kind of psalm it is.
Yeah.
Who uses footnotes? Nobody uses footnotes.
But we tend to, with public life, we tend to complain about it, or we have our political ideology. The Israelites knew how to lament to God about things that went on in public. I was also, when you were talking about ecumenical gatherings, I've been in a few, and I was in a really interesting one of the Doctrine of Justification. So we had Lutherans, Reformed, Methodist, and Catholic. And the Catholic theologian I got to be good friends with was somebody that you would know, Larry Boat. Larry died before we finished on it. Just a wonderful of a guy.
Wonderful man. Wonderful man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so back to Roland Murphy's. You're also a scholar of the Song of Songs, which I want to touch on briefly. You read the Burrito Lam commentary on that, which is great. Roland decided that his graduate students, there were 3 of us, were going to read the Song of Songs, and we would meet at 7 in the morning. He was a morning guy. He'd go to bed at 7:30 at night and wake up at 3 a.m. And so we tried to read the Song of Songs in Hebrew at 7 a.m. And none of the words, you don't know any of the words because they're all Hebrew. It's the only use of the Hebrew word in the Bible. Anyway, say that's other poetry in the Bible beyond the Psalms. We have the Song of Songs. Say just briefly like what that is and what does that mean to Christians today?
Well, first of all, the Song of Songs, everything you want to know about sex from a celibate. That's the subtitle of my. Again, when you say what do Catholics think about the Song of Songs? Well, it depends upon whether or not they're interpreting it figuratively or they're using historical critical material. I find it fascinating that the Roman Catholic Church has espoused historical critical approach for all of the books of the Bible except Song of Songs. They still interpret Song of Songs. Some scholars don't, but they still interpret it as love poetry between, God and the soul, God and the church. And in no way do I think that's originally what it means. It probably is based on, if not an interpretation of certain Egyptian love poetry. And the Song of Songs has always been very difficult to categorize. Is it wisdom? And, it's poetry, but it's not the Psalms. So where do you put it? Or do you put it in miscellaneous, which is the Ketubim, So where do you put the Song of Songs? Is it wisdom? Because Solomon's name is answered. So you put that with Proverbs and Koheleth as well. So we've not known, it really is in a certain sense a sui generis. But everybody realizes and acknowledges that it is a collection of love poetry. And I want to say that fundamentally, it is erotic love poetry. And, the question that I, as an interpreter, have is not what does it mean? I'd like to have been part of the conversation of the group that decided whether or not it's going to be part of the canon. But it does not seem, if you read things, it does not seem that was a problem. Like Koheleth was a problem. How do you get it in the canon? So the whole question about it, how do you interpret it, or what does it mean? The question is, how do you interpret it? And I want to interpret it as historical critical, which means it is love poetry. Now that says something then about and God is not mentioned in the song of Songs. So what makes it religious poetry? And what makes it religious poetry is ultimately the interpretation, because Israel said it's the love poetry between God and Israel, which is a very common theme in the prophets, where Israel is referred to as my bride, Israel is referred to as my unfaithful wife. So that theme is very much an Old Testament theme. So when ancient Israel then thinks about it as relationship between God and Israel, that's very much a part of the prophetic tradition, which then the Christians probably just appropriated and changed it from God and Israel to God and the church. But it's first of all love poetry. And what does it tell us? It tells us what the metaphor tells us, that the erotic love between a man and a woman is sacred enough to be used to speak about the love between God and people. So it has something to say of, there is absolutely no condemnation of the eroticism in the psalm. Also, feminists ought to love this book because it's always the woman talking. And when we find out what the man is saying, she is repeating what the man is saying. So it's from a woman's point of view. So what you have here is, and this is contemporary, I don't know if it was ancient, you've got a biblical book that not only accepts, but in a sense showcases female eroticism, her desire for him, her longing for him. That anyone would think that that's only what men do. They have absolutely no idea of, the sexual nature of a woman. But that's contemporary interpretation. I don't know if you can say that's what the ancient world was thinking. The closest you can come is to say it's an expansion of that metaphor that speaks about God and Israel. But in a certain sense, that's the metaphor doesn't operate in, if that is the metaphor, it doesn't operate in Song of Songs as it operates in the prophets, because in the prophets, it's God longing for his bride. It's God speaking about the love he has for his bride. That's not what you have in the Song of Songs. So again, you got the metaphor, but it's turned sideways or it's turned upside down. So, and I love that because it invites numerous interpretations, which metaphor should do. You cannot have one interpretation of a metaphor. So, I think you can, and all of these interpretations, I think, are valid being true to the text. The question is whether or not you're true to the historical context. And my response to that is, which historical context?
Yeah, that's just fascinating, Diane. When I was doing my PhD at Duke with Father Murphy, the history of interpretation was becoming a big thing. And David Steinmetz taught at Duke, and he was big on the history of interpretation of the Bible. And there was so much there. So something like the Song of Songs or Psalm 137 or whatever. These passages, and we could talk about an original context, and then how it was interpreted by St. Augustine or Martin Luther or whoever through the ages. And we learn so much from that rich conversation. There's a depth, as you say, a metaphor doesn't mean just one thing. C.S. Lewis said the meaning of the text isn't limited to the intention of the author.
That's right.
That's really interesting.
Now, what did you do your dissertation on? What was your topic?
Psalm 90.
Oh, really?
That's the title of it was More Than You Would Ever Want to Know About Psalm. That's not true. It was a hermeneutical study of the psalm based on the history of interpretation.
I worked on Job.
Ah.
The anthropological motifs in Job.
Ah.
And I worked with Norman Howell, who's
wow.
Yeah, Lutheran. Yeah, Norman Howell.
He's a great Job I remember he was the first to help me understand the nature of Job's friends and how they weren't friends.
You know, he was working on that commentary when he promised me, I will not publish anything until you finish your dissertation. And I thought that was so gracious because I know people whose advisors published things before the dissertation was finished.
Oh.
I won't publish anything.
Bro, I treasure all of Roland's books, but the ones that he wrote while I was with him, and some I've helped read and edit and put an index together and so on. I take such pride to have just been watch him put such a book together. That's absolutely an amazing thing. Diane, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you being with us so much.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be. Thank you very much. I don't know if I answered your questions adequately, but No,
it was great. Right, you mentioned that the Song of Songs doesn't mention God. So Father Murphy and I we had an argument about this. So we got over to chapter 8 where it says love is stronger than death.
Yep.
And he uses that phrase that I think it should be translated intensive flame. It had that Yah suffix. Mm-hmm. Roland said it's the flames of Yahweh, it's the flames of the Lord. And I said, that's not right.
It doesn't say that.
Yeah, so I preached at his memorial service that we had to do in 2002 after he died, and people thought it was funny. I brought up this argument, and I said, I guess he knows now that he was wrong, which was just a silly thing to say.
I love that passage, which again took on new meaning when a very close friend of mine died. That, love is stronger than death. Then it takes another example of how, the context within which it's being read opens up the meaning, and then you see new meaning. But I've always loved that passage, but it took on very, very deep meaning and comforting meaning when a good friend of mine died. Yeah.
And I remember translating that with Roland Murphy, and he alluded to Marvin Pope's commentary. So Roland thought that should be translated, love is as strong as death. And Marvin Pope said stronger than death. And I'll never forget, Roland got a tear in his eye, and he said, Marvin was working on this while his wife was dying of cancer. Isn't that?
Yeah.
Everything's got some deep personal context like that, doesn't it?
The truth. Yeah.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us. This has been just super. Our people are going to love hearing from you.
I'm very happy to have been part of it. Thank you for inviting me, and good luck with your class.
Oh, thank you so much. You've made it better just being with us today.
I appreciate that. Thank you.